you need to grasp and understand your personal finances first. There's no way you should jump into investing in real estate or anything for that matter without buttoning up your own personal finances. And I treat, my personal finances like running a business. Like I mentioned again, like I
Mm,
know what my income is every month. I know what my expenses are every month. I have a $0 credit card balance every month. Like I would highly suggest getting that all buttoned up before jumping into the real estate world, because if you can't manage your personal finances, I think it's going to be hard to manage an investment property.
Hey, welcome everyone to the Real Estate Investing Real Talk with your host. I'm Sherwin G.
I'm Tyler J. What's up?
Hey, what's up, Tyler? How's it going? I don't know. I just thought like Sherwin G sounds more like a fancy
It,
disc
it
jockey
sounds
name.
like we're now in an actual radio show or something. Like we have DJ names. So
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I could say my
Sherwin
whole.
G and Tyler J.
Yeah, there you go. So, welcome everybody to the show. This is a show that we do real talk, real stories surrounding the real estate investing world. So, we have a interesting episode today, right, Tyler?
Episode 2.
Yep.
So this is, yeah, I mean, we're continuing this journey.
Mhm.
As you hopefully may have watched episode 1, we are doubling down on the content world, trying to educate you all in the real estate space, give you that real talk, real experience of what we've been going through, both the good and bad, the wins and the losses, we'll call them.
Mm.
And yeah, this episode, I think Sherwin actually brought up the fact that it might be kind of cool to go down kind of a chronological order of um, our investing kind of career and our history, and which may even translate over to our viewers and kind of how they started. So I think that the main theme of this episode, episode 2, is really surrounding kind of why we invest in real estate. What is our why? How do we get into this world and into this industry? Some tangible steps on how we actually prepared to make that first investment, which is always a little bit scary. And there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of risks. And then really, I think we're going to end more so on the fact of, or I guess the topics of kind of back to how we prepared for that first investment. Was it through smart budgeting? Was it through just pure inspiration and just jumping in without a plan, or
Mhm.
what it really took to make that first investment and get into this industry?
Yeah, I think episode one was sort of like, all right, let's just go out there, do our intro, and kind of let everyone know what this whole show's about. And we thought about episode two of being, okay, let's talk about us transitioning full time into REI, which, Tyler, you have a pretty interesting story about that. But we figured, like you mentioned, maybe we'll do something chronological to get get our viewers and listeners, get to know us a little bit better. So we'll save that transitioning to REI full time in a future episode. So stay tuned. But
Oh
for
yes,
now,
we got the teasers out there. The teasers out there.
yeah. So bear with us. We're trying to make us. We were vulnerable, trying to tell our story, and I think this is a great way to kind of tell our story. Basically, how we got started into investing in real estate and what's our why. So I don't know. You wanna kick it off? I'm gonna put you in the hot seat this time. You want to kick off?
Oh
Maybe
man,
maybe.
what?
Why
So
why did you even think about, or like maybe you didn't even think about investing in real estate? What made you want to, I guess, invest? Have another stream of income. I guess.
yeah, so I mean I go back to the year of 2016, which is what, 4.5, 5 years ago.
Mm,
Um, I was working a good job in an industry that I loved, kind of like almost my dream job, really.
yeah.
I after college I went kind of down the road of following my passions and hobbies, we'll call it, and I got into
Mm,
the sports industry, which I've been doing for 10 plus years now, and so
mm,
I saw myself in a really cool job that I enjoyed, but I also saw myself with that current income, and kind of my finances, that it would take me, multiple decades to actually retire.
mm,
And so I started searching for ways to buy back my time. I think naturally as I got older, and maybe you too, Sherwin, and maybe our audience as well, you start to think like more long term,
mm,
especially in your late 20s, right before you hit 30. You're like, what am I doing with my life, right?
mm,
And so I found out that I guess I felt that I needed to create more income streams outside of work so I could
uh,
enjoy life, family, friends, travel more, and not be cooped up in that job and a boss. Again, I still enjoyed my job, but I just felt like I wasn't going down the path that I really wanted long term. So
Mhm.
I needed to find ways to bring in more income. And a little bit of a tangent there. I actually kind of got into this like phase of wanting to do, hashtag van life, like I
Oh
wanted to
yeah,
like
yeah,
sell all my possessions, go minimalistic, travel the US in a van,
yeah.
and that required like lowering my expenses. So I was really conscious of like trying to lower my expenses and then bring in like monthly recurring income.
Uh-huh.
And so my answer to how do I bring in monthly recurring income was real estate.
Ah.
And so that's kind of how the real estate vehicle of investing kind of was introduced to me, and how I started absorbing information in that world.
Mhm.
That was the first step, man. Is like finding ways to bring in recurring income, not wanting to work enough in a cubicle for 40 years,
Mhm.
and then trying to live my life through van life and
Yeah.
explore the world.
That's cool because like van life is sort of like that's an in thing now, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's like downsizing, getting those sprinter vans, and just kind of being the nomad, the digital nomad, and just
Mhm.
traveling the world and stuff. But you thought about it like years ago, so you're like a pioneer.
Well, I never actually committed to it, so I was more of a dreamer, we'll call it. But
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it kind of it kicked my butt in gear, and got me thinking about again if I
Mhm.
really wanted to travel the U.S. and enjoy time and freedom, how could I actually
Mhm.
survive on the road?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
for the answer for me was rental real estate.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
guess that's kind of the period of life that got me into it. But
Mhm.
obviously, I think the big why and the takeaways there for me, and this may be a cliched answer, but I wanted more time and freedom
Mhm.
with family and friends.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's great. I mean, like, my initial why, and we were talking about this earlier. My why sort of changed throughout you know, depending on the situation that I'm in on my life that I'm in right now, right? My why is like, you see my background, right? Hanging out in the beach. You see that cliche. Oh, I want to sip margaritas at the beach and be financially free, and that's what everyone says. You hear that over and over again, right? And I mean, to be honest, like back when I even thought about investing in real estate, I knew nothing. I was like, I'm so green. I was such a newbie. My why was basically, I just didn't want to pay rent anymore.
Yeah.
Like when I didn't want to, I made the choice, like, okay, I've been paying rent for so many years. And I'm like, rather than me pay that rent to my landlord to pay down his or her home, why not I just buy a place so I can just pay down my own place? And I just made that choice. I was, it's a little harder when you're younger because you're not really making that much money. And this is when I think I graduated from college. It was a couple years after college, and I just moved to the Bay Area, and I was here for like maybe a couple years. I'm like, okay. I got a better job now, so I got some good income from my architectural career. Not that much because you don't make that much when you're in architectural when you first get in the game. But I just was like, okay, I'm sick of paying rent to a landlord paying down their home. Let me figure out how to, you know, buy my own first property and become a homeowner. And it wasn't until later on when I got more into like, oh, I want to make passive income. I didn't really know what passive income was, you know. And as far as like the goals of like, hey, I want to be, free and flexible with my time. I mean, literally, I just wanted to buy a place so I don't want to pay rent anymore. I just wanted to pay a mortgage. That was like the first initial reason why I got into like real estate. And later down the line, I realized, oh, it's a great way to get passive income. And also, I mean, I knew like my dad's actually a real estate agent back home in Hawaii, and he's like, oh, real estate's a great way to kind of build your wealth. So if you want to invest in something, real estate's a good investment vehicle to invest at versus like kind of like I mean there's stocks and 401k and all that stuff. Stocks was too volatile for me. I don't know anything about stocks. I still don't know anything about stocks. So you know Warren Buffett said like always invest for a long term. And I was like, okay, I knew real estate. I felt comfortable with that asset because having an architecture background, I can touch feel homes and properties and so forth. So I felt more comfortable. Hey, real estate might be the best option for me to kind of build my wealth and invest in my future. So that's why I kind of like that was my kind of like initial why. And then it's funny because going through that whole process of we're gonna that's what we're gonna talk about, like what did we do, the steps that we did to in order to purchase our first property. As I more got into it, then I started realizing the other benefits, like, oh, something called passive income, and there's something called, generational wealth and all that. And I wouldn't have came across that path unless I made that conscious choice. Like, hey, let's go buy a place right now, and so forth. So,
I'll say that kind of on that note, I for sure, and this may not be the best strategic move,
mhm,
but I learned and educated myself a lot more after closing on that first property than I did before. Like I
mhm,
started, like I learned the basics before I bought that first property,
mhm,
but then I know once I closed on that first property, I was so motivated. Like my days were consumed by real estate after that first like itch was scratched,
mhm.
and I learned like within the next 6 months, I'm sure I learned so much more about the industry in those first 6 months after closing than I did like the first year before closing. So it's kind of a funny, I guess, route that I took. But before we hop into that, I'm curious. Do you have any like
Mhm,
in terms of like inspirations?
mhm.
What got you into this world? Do you have any like books or podcasts that kind of got you motivated and inspired to really go down this route?
Yeah, I mean, to your point that you said earlier, I never really got into kind of uh, studying or really looking more into real estate until after I got this deal.
Mm.
Prior to that, I knew nothing about loans and mortgages. I still don't know that much, right? That's like the one thing I really hate about whatever. That's why I have partners that know much more than me, right?
Mhm.
But then, I really was like, okay, I was more concentrated on like, how do I get that down payment, right? What do I need to do to get that step one, right? But then prior to that, I was listening to Real Estate Guys, Real Estate Network. I don't know if you heard of them. They've been on forever. They were on before Bigger Pockets, and you know,
They were
I
on
was
before us too, man.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah, exactly. So I started listening to them a lot. They were talking about investing in real estate and so forth. But even before that, I was looking at even like Susie Orman.
Hmm.
Like she's pretty conservative, but as far as getting my finances and my budgeting, intact in order for me to accomplish the goal of saving money for a down payment and accomplish my goal to buy real estate, I kind of looked at her for kind of guidance. I got her book and and did what she suggested and so forth. And then later down the line, you got the Bible, right? Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert
Hmm.
Kiyosaki, Cash Flow Quadrant. That really opened up my mind into kind of like investing in real estate and exploring those avenues of buying assets and limiting your liabilities. So those are like kind of like initial kind of inspirations. I think a lot of investors who just started, they probably would name that purple book as their number one
Rich Dad
inspiration.
Poor Dad. I feel like
Right,
that's
right,
the
yeah,
number one book referenced in the Bigger Pockets podcast because they always ask like, "What's your favorite like
yeah, yeah. What's your
real estate
favorite
or business
book?
book?" It's always Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah, yeah. What about
But
what about you?
I well, I think it's important to consume content, before you make that first leap
Mm,
into real estate. And so, yes, I mean, similar. I did read that book, and I was very attracted to the podcast and audio format of content because I could listen to it on the way to work or at the
mm,
gym. And so, I was very heavily invested in a lot of business podcasts. One of the first that really got me hooked was called Entrepreneurs on Fire. Actually, it was a daily
mm,
podcast by a guy named John Lee Dumas. And I remember for one episode, he interviewed a guy that ran a turnkey investment property firm,
mm,
and that's where I got really hooked, and I figured out like that was going to be my first plan of attack. So, kind of transitioning into like our first deals.
mm,
I guess that's our segue right there. But yeah, through a podcast, through a business podcast,
mm,
in an interview with a turnkey provider, I was like, this is how I jump into this world because I was living in the Bay Area, still am, and I
mm,
couldn't really afford anything in the area that would cash flow. It's
mm,
pretty hard to do out here.
mm,
And the concept of buying something out of state, thousands of miles away, not even seeing it seemed quite foreign. But if you were able to partner with a turnkey company that was supposed to, help you with acquisition, help you with renovation, help you with finding a tenant, and then
mm.
helping you with management, I was like, sign me up. This is going to be my first step into real estate, and that's ultimately the route I took.
Yeah,
And I don't know if we want to go down that just yet, but my
yeah.
first deal was a turnkey property in Indianapolis, 2,000 miles away from my home,
Mhm.
out here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Sometimes I forget how young you were, or how young you are, because back when you first started, you had like there's probably a bunch of podcasts for you to listen to. I started my first investment was in 2005. There wasn't that many podcasts around there. I don't know if Bigger
That's
Podcast was
crazy.
there, and that's why Real Estate Network guys, they were there, and I think there were some YouTube videos, or maybe I just did a good job of searching. I'm sure they were
Yeah.
there. I just probably wasn't aware of as much as aware now of the all the resources out, because there's like a ton right now. But
Yeah.
back in 2005, I was reading books.
Yeah.
And even before, really, I was reading like Susie Orman books, like
Yeah.
budgeting and money. So I
Yeah.
think, I don't know, like maybe your journey is a little bit different from mine, but what are some of the habits or the steps that you did to prepare yourself to buy that first turnkey deal that you bought? And I kind of reference, I'm looking at my notes, like I read an article just a couple of days ago about like kind of like this article talk about like simple habits to achieve financial freedom.
Hmm.
And some of the four habits they mentioned was like minimize your credit cards, invest before you spend, buy insurance plans for you and your family, which I thought was
Yeah.
kind of interesting, and keep track of your expenses and
Yeah.
expenses. And I'm like, oh, this is sort of what I did, but I'm kind of curious to see if you know that kind of aligns to what you did, or maybe you did something different to kind of like, what did you do to like, okay, you made that decision, we'll buy real estate.
Yep.
You made that, okay. What do you do from then? What did you do? Like track your finances and so forth. Like it'd be kind of interesting to hear your story.
I
Yeah.
think I gotta say, I think I lucked out and it was easier for me than a lot of people because, and maybe I have to credit my parents for this and their upbringing of
Mm,
me. But for whatever reason, I was always afraid of debt, we'll call it. I was
mm,
always conscious of my finances. I always knew how much I made. I always knew how much I spent. I always knew that it was important to save. And
mm,
so I don't my answer may not be great because it was actually somewhat just it was like just ingrained in me for whatever reason, and maybe that's just due to my parents. But I think it's very important from an early age, and maybe if you're watching this now, and even if you're 50 or 60 years old, you need to grasp and understand your personal finances first. There's no way you should jump into investing in real estate or anything for that matter without buttoning up your own personal finances. And I treat, my personal finances like running a business. Like I mentioned again, like I
mm,
know what my income is every month. I know what my expenses are every month. I have a $0 credit card balance every month. Like I would highly suggest getting that all buttoned up before jumping into the real estate world, because if you can't manage your personal finances, I think it's going to be hard to manage an investment property.
mm,
That's my 2 cents, and I think it just sets you up for a good foundation. So, like I said, I was always a good saver for whatever reason. Maybe that was because my parents. So I would say somewhat frugal, and
mm.
but then after college and after getting my first job, I was sitting there, 8 to 10 years later, haven't really, dipped my toe in the investing world, but I had a nice cash kind of cushion set aside. But
Mm.
it was just sitting in a savings account, technically losing money because it didn't even get interest that would beat like inflation.
Oh, you didn't get that fancy
I
savings
I didn't get
interest
those
that everyone
savings, those
gets.
high interest savings accounts, man.
Oh
And
man.
so I remember literally looking at my bank account going like, okay, so do I just keep saving for the rest of my life and then retire? Like I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so again, luckily through my frugal habits, my personal finance habits, I had amassed some money, in my late 20s, not a ton,
Yeah.
but enough to take a leap. And I bought a house all cash, $37,000,
Mm.
sight unseen, gave it to a turnkey company, didn't properly vet them. It didn't turn out well, but I learned a lot.
Yeah, yeah. You're diving into the next episode, man.
Oh yeah, I don't want
No,
to I can't give you the full
no,
details yet. You got to
no, it's
stay tuned
fine.
for episode
Yeah.
3.
No, I
But
mean
yeah,
seriously. I mean, you just kind of touched on that first point, like kind of minimize your credit card use, right?
yep.
Like and like I kind of did the same way when when I was reading like Susie Orman, watching her videos and stuff. She's more about making budgets. I was like, okay, let me find out where I'm spending my money. And back then, I'm not going to age myself, but like we didn't have fancy apps like Mint,
Yep.
or I think you use Personal Capital. Is that
Personal
what it's called?
capital is what I
Yeah,
use, yeah.
I didn't have. So I had like a spreadsheet. I don't even think like Google Sheets was around then, but I had like an Excel spreadsheet, right? And what I did was, I had my credit card statements that came in, and I manually inputted all that on the spreadsheet.
Mm.
And also on my, like, back then we had like checkbooks. You kids don't know what a checkbook is, right? So I would look at my accounts, and I would literally just log in everything that I spent and everything that came in, like my income from work and all that, anything that came in, all my assets, I guess we call, and then all my expenses, like a business, right? So I manually inputted that in every month, like wrote where I got it from, or where what I spent on, whether if it's restaurant or if it's entertainment or whatever, and how much I did. Because it's something about like, kind of manually inputting this in, it subconsciously gets into your mind.
Hmm.
It's almost like in my architecture days when you're drawing, the hand draw kind of mind hand to mind kind of a connection, right? So it's almost similar, but except I'm typing it because I'm a faster typer than my handwriting's ugly and it would be so messy. But I manually inputted this for
Yep.
like for like back then, and I still kind of do it right now, right? So I have these spreadsheets where so I know exactly where my money's going, right? So subconsciously, I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I spent this much on food. And the good thing about the credit card statement is they give you like a year-end statement and they kind of categorize it for you. I'm like, oh my gosh, I spent this much on entertainment and food. I gotta
Mhm.
and
Cut
back
that
then,
back.
back then it's like after during college and after college, the majority of my time I'm going out to eat. I don't
Mhm.
cook,
Yeah.
I want to be out with my friends, and that's where the majority. So I looked at kind of like these. I don't want to say holes, but kind of like where my expenses go, and I was kind of, you know, you said frugal, right? So I was like, okay, maybe I should cut down. So I didn't really be frugal, right? So one of the things, okay, maybe I don't spend so much on food now. Maybe I buy groceries and I cook more, right, and so forth. So I kind of did like little stuff like that to sort of like increase my net cash flow every month. But on top of that, I remember doing this. I was renting with a good friend of mine down in Fremont here in California, and I was like, when I made that decision, okay, I want to buy a place, right? So like you said, know how much you're making and know how much you're getting. So I knew how much I made, and I minus like my rent at that time that I was paying with my buddy. So I had some wiggle room because I had some savings at the end, so because I was saving. So I was like, all right, so maybe like just around numbers. Okay, maybe I was paying, I don't know, maybe 1,300 a month for my half, whatever. So I was like, okay, let me bump it up and say 2,000. So extra $700 goes to my
Mhm.
savings. Because I'm thinking if I want to buy like a 400, 500K house, which is kind of unheard of right now in the Bay Area, but back then it
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
possible, then that would be my mortgage payment. I was roughing like $2,000 mortgage payment is what maybe I can afford. So I did that every month. Okay, got paid $2,000 in the savings.
Yep.
Live how I live right now. If do I have to eat well, we call saimin in
I
Hawaii,
mean
but
noodles.
ramen. Yeah, do I have to eat top ramen or pork
Yep.
and beans for the next month?
Yeah.
Will I be able to survive? So I
Yep.
did that for like the next months and then a couple of years. And at the same time, I was saving. That kind of forced me to save, but I was sort of practicing paying my mortgage, right?
I like that.
So if I had $2,000 mortgage, went to savings, and then kind of just figure out my lifestyle. Can I still go out and watch a movie? Can I still go out with friends and just be more conscious about that? And then if I'm comfortable, go maybe I can bump it up a little bit more. Maybe I got a raise or
Mhm.
promotion, right? Bump it up a little bit more, right? So that's how I sort of got the mindset of like, okay, kind of forced me to kind of save and kind of practice paying down the mortgage, right? So but I think to your point, the most important was sort of tracking what you're exactly spending and what you're making, and then because a lot of these times you don't know what you're spending right now.
Mhm.
Everyone's just swipe that credit card,
Mhm.
you know pay with your phone, or or with your watch or whatever, and it's just kind of like you call it fugazi, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
like it's just money in the air because everything's
Yep.
just in
Swipe,
the
swipe,
cloud
swipe.
now.
Digital
Yeah,
numbers on a
yeah,
computer screen, basically. But
yeah,
I think takeaways really, I think from this little segment, we'll call it, is really understanding your personal finances first.
hmm
I think you put a quote here. This is actually one of my favorite quotes. Like, what gets measured gets managed,
hmm
and it's really
yeah,
just. I think a lot of people are unfortunately a little scared to measure and manage their finances because maybe they are in debt or maybe they know that their spending habits are not the greatest. But
hmm
I would sit here right now and urge you, whoever's listening, whoever's watching,
yeah,
like, bite the bullet, sit down, take a look at your last 6 months of
yeah,
expenses,
yeah,
and literally go through those things line by line just to see where you might be able to, improve your savings perhaps, or maybe, have some extra money for investment or the stock market. But I also don't want to encourage anyone to be super frugal where they're literally eating, they're living in a horrible house with no water and
yeah,
electricity. it's
yeah,
it's kind of a balance, right? But
yeah.
just be responsible, understand your finances. That's really what will set you up for a great future.
Yeah, I mean, like now, like I touched earlier, like now there's fancy apps like Mint and Personal Capital, and then once Mint came out, I s- I started using that app, and as you said, like I was kind of depressed because it called me out. It shows
Yeah,
Bart and chats.
yeah.
Bart's and charts like, hey, Sherwin, this is your income. By the way, this is your
This is how
expense.
much you spent.
Right? And I was like, screw this app. I'm not gonna listen to this anymore. So, I was like kind of depressed. I didn't want to look at it anymore because it really, kind of told me the truth. Because I don't know if anybody knows about Mint. We're not sponsored by them, but you can kind of link your accounts on there, and it kind of just manually kind of generates it for you, which is kind of great. Nowadays I still use Mint, but more so just to kind of collate all my accounts together so I can see all my balances right away.
Mhm,
But I don't even use it for budgeting because I use something else. I just kind of use Google Sheets to kind of manually kind of keep it up. And like you said, I set up my expenses now like a business,
mhm,
like a P&L sheet.
mhm. Yep,
Like,
exactly.
what's my income from my wife, from me coming in, from all our real estate assets, and then what's our liabilities? Just like a P&L sheet, and we kind of like set up our. We don't have a budget. It's more like, okay, now we can see what our P&Ls and where the holes are. Like, maybe we got to think about making more money or not. And then interesting said about like, you know we don't want people living frugal or anything. And I heard an interesting quote the other day on another podcast. It was like, don't live beneath your means, expand your means.
Mm, yep.
Right. And it's a whole thing. Like, I think the next kind of like, well, we're kind of jumping around our little, I'm looking at our notes, like saving versus kind
Investing.
of kind of investing,
Yep.
right? And you know I don't know about for you, but for me, I kind of grew up in an Asian household. Back home, my parents were like, hey, sure, and get a job, or like, go to school, go to college, get a degree, get a job, make money and save, then buy the house.
Yep.
That's what we are sort of, that's what I was ingrained. That's how many people are kind of ingrained to do, right? And it wasn't until later on in my investing career, someone told me like, don't think about saving more, think about making more.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, that's kind of true, because a lot of times people are like saving, 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 but it takes forever
That's
sometimes.
how I was. That was literally my
Mhm.
path. Like I
Yeah.
said earlier, like my whole goal was to just keep saving and watching that bank account grow. But then I sat there one day and I was like, what do I do with this money?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's when I finally shifted to like, you can't. Yes, some people can save their way to retirement, we'll call it,
Mm,
but I knew that I had to find ways to make that money grow on its own
mm.
and accelerate that growth. Like,
Yeah.
again, if you're sitting there with 50K cash in a savings account accruing 0.5% interest right now,
Mm,
like what I'm getting at Ally Bank,
yeah.
you're
Yeah.
literally losing money because it's not keeping up with inflation. So,
Yeah.
this, I don't know if this is the topic we want to cover now, but yeah, there's a big difference between saving and investing. And
Yeah.
I have now been able to kind of shift my mindset where, once I kind of fill up, I have like we'll call it an emergency fund.
Mhm.
It's like 3 to 6 months of expenses,
Yeah.
but anything I make over that goes straight to an investing vehicle, whether
Mhm.
that's the stock market, an index fund, um, or real estate.
Yeah.
And once I have that emergency fund built and set, I don't feel like I need to have any more cash on me. I want to try and utilize any extra cash and have it grow for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think Rich Dad Poor Dad Kiyosaki, one of his philosophies was like, think of your money as your employees, and you make
yep.
them go to work. If they're just sitting in your bank account, you're not making them work,
So maybe
right?
we should touch on a
Yeah.
couple things that you do, or I guess what do you do to make your money grow for you and work for you?